Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and today, before we talk about the actual video thing, we're going to acknowledge that I have reached the 400 subscriber milestone, 411 at the time of recording this. I reached 400 earlier, but I had sort of a few backlogged videos, and I don't edit anything, so I really had no way to acknowledge it until, like, now, basically. Anyways, so, as always, thanks to everybody who has decided to subscribe, because whether or not you're actually watching this, and I know some of you have subscribed but aren't actually watching, I nonetheless appreciate the positive thumbs up that this means, that you believe that these videos are in some way worthy of attention, and I am flattered and puzzled. But leaving aside my eternal puzzlement, because, I mean, thank you for showing up to listen to me talk aimlessly at you. I am nonetheless extremely grateful, and I look forward to the next time I reach some sort of subscriber milestone. I'll let you guys know when I hit 500. Anyways, so those few but faithful who have decided to show up for this, you're probably more interested in hearing me talk aimlessly about a book. Well, let's talk about, first of all, about how horrific this cover is, because not only has Dolittle been misspelled on this cover, but this is also just a horrible looking cover. This is, like, bad on so many levels. I don't know why he looks like this. I don't know why the background is red. I don't know why they decided to use that particular color technique thing. I don't know why he's got a dog when Jip the dog is, like, one of the less important characters in this book. I mean, like, this should be all about Polynesia the parrot if we're talking about animals, because Polynesia the parrot is, like, all the things. She is also deeply, deeply offensive in something that I will get to in a moment, but the reason why this particular cover and this particular edition is because I don't own this edition, and I decided to just go to the public library to take it out, because while this is out of copyright now, and I could have gone looking on Gutenberg, which is probably the best place to go for any books that are out of copyright, the great advantage to the library is it gives me a 3-week limit and forces me to actually finish reading the book, instead of what I tend to wind up doing, which is saying, oh, but that other thing that I want to read that isn't for the channel. So here we go. This is the book. I would advise do not get books from eBooksLib, because the fact that they've misspelled it and the cover is this hideous does not speak generally well of their production values. So there you go. So why is Polynesia the parrot offensive? Well, the thing about Polynesia the parrot is you have to understand right from the start in the very first book, but continuing through this one, Polynesia is an old lady. She is 200 years old. She remembers King Charles when he was stuck in the tree, and if I could dredge up the memory of what that was about, I would mention it, but I can't, because my grasp of English mythology about their kings and so on is limited. Like, I believe the King Charles stuck in the tree is probably something a little bit like George Washington chopping down the cherry tree. But anyways, like, I think it may have been a thing that happened, but it's been mythologized sufficiently that it, like, almost didn't happen. You know, when things get sufficiently mythologized that they didn't happen the way they did in the myth, and so, in a way, what you know isn't what actually happened. Anyhow, neither here nor there. She's very old, and she's got that whole old cranky lady thing going for her, even though she is a parrot, but also she is exactly the kind of person who wants what she wants, and she doesn't care what anyone else wants, and she isn't really a nice person. It's very clear in the first book she's not really a nice person. She has low opinions about practically everybody. That, you know, if she likes you, that's great, but if she doesn't particularly like you, she just doesn't care or thinks the worst of you. And so Polynesia the parrot is the person who uses the notorious N-word 3 times in the space of a single page. Nowhere else. And I was particularly surprised because the first book seemed to indicate some awareness on Hugh Lofting's part about the difficulties and problems with colonization, or at least some of the issues that were rather more visible when he has this fictional king of a fictional country inform Dr. Dolittle that he's not putting up with any more white people because they go tramping through his land, kill all of his elephants, walk off with all the ivory, and, like, don't even say thank you. Which, you know, that's a very pointed remark. And one would have expected somebody who was capable of making such pointed remarks to maybe not use language that perhaps, yes, was less offensive in 1922, but was nonetheless still a term of opprobrium, and perhaps not one that should have been in children's literature. But then again, times have changed, and what was once non-offensive language or merely mildly offensive language has become much, much significantly more deeply offensive. Granted, part of that is simply consciousness of how offensive it ought to be as opposed to how offensive it was at the time within certain groups. But anyways, the point is, it took me rather by surprise, and, you know, there are arguments to be made about these books being racist, but I'll be honest, other than that one blip, it doesn't feel any significantly more racist than anything else written at the time. I'm a very big fan of placing things within the consciousness of their moment and saying, but was this progressive in the moment or average in the moment as opposed to actively offensive in the moment? Because in this case, no, he's not saying bad things about all native Aboriginal peoples worldwide. Bumpo is an idiot, and yes, he plays the black serving man who's kind of an idiot, but Bumpo's father isn't an idiot, and one gets the feeling that Bumpo's father sent him to Oxford for the same reason many fictional rich people send their children to Oxford, and that is to get them out of the house and somewhere where they'll cause trouble to someone who isn't their parents. Bumpo very much feels like an upper-class twit rather than a black stereotype, because Bumpo's father feels like a put-upon aggravated father who has to put up with a son who's just not that bright. And there have been a lot of rich men who put up with sons who weren't that bright, who sent them away to university because it got rid of them. All throughout fiction, and probably some in the world generally, in the real world. And Bumpo feels to me at least partially like that, even though he is to an extent the stereotype of the Aboriginal person brought to the UK and taken to a UK university in order to make him more English and hopefully to bring the civilizing influence back to their savage native lands. You know, there is a quality of that, but like I said, he feels in a lot of ways a lot more upper-class twit in terms of how and why he got to where he got. Anyhow, but Dr. Dolittle is extremely admiring of the, pardon me, the Indian person, because, you know, we called them Indians back then, the Native American? Native South American? Yeah, he's supposed to be from South America, so he's, you know, Southern Amerindian. So, you know, whatever they call the native people in South America. But anyways, because I don't speak either Spanish or Portuguese, so I don't know what they call them. Anyways, so he's very, very admiring of the man, and it's a civilized admiration. It's, you know, not it doesn't feel like noble savage. It genuinely feels just like he'd heard about this awesome guy from the animals who could talk and, you know, tell him about this other awesome guy, and so he wanted to meet him. There's some paternalistic stuff about the native tribe, but, you know, there's also just a lot of great, fun, creative stuff. Like the Doctor managing to stop all bullfighting in a city in Spain by taking advantage of the fact that he can talk to the bulls and arrange stuff with them in advance. There's the fact that they managed to get home from the formerly floating island, and I love the concept of the floating island, that just pure happenstance meant that a giant bubble of air got caught underneath this island, and due to the course of plate tectonics and air, it has floated everywhere on its giant bubble. But, you know, that they're on this island and they can't get home until they manage to get in contact with an enormous sea snail that lives in the depths of the ocean and has a ginormous see-through shell that they can ride home inside of his shell. And it's creative, and it's fun and fascinating. And as I said, Dr. Dolittle is just a wonderfully smart character. That it's a school smart sort of smart. It's a person who figures out languages by sitting down and scribbling away in a book until he's worked out grammar and syntax and pronunciation, and figures it out in, you know, mere days because he's just that smart. And so this book is just as good a time as the first one. The really interesting difference is that this book is narrated from the perspective of Dr. Dolittle's apprentice. That is, a boy about 10 years old becomes fascinated by the Doctor, by this man who can talk to animals, and sets out to learn how to talk to animals, and effectively gets himself apprenticed to the Doctor, which he will do at least partly in lieu of school. The Doctor, because, yes, he's 10, but his parents are too poor to send him to school, so he can't learn to read and write. And one of the things the Doctor tells our hero's parents, our narrator's parents, is that, you know, sure, he can take the kid on for room and board, but he'll also teach him to read and write and maybe do some math. And that's what really wins the mother over, is she says, listen, he'll do this for 2 years, and even if he doesn't become some naturalist or what have you, he'll still have come out of there having learned to read and write, which is more than what we can give him. So, the kid whose name I don't recall off the top of my head because I'm bad with names, he narrates the book from the perspective of himself as an old man remembering his youth. It's a really interesting, slightly weird approach to these books, to have a man saying, you know, I'm in my 70s now, and I remember when I was 10 years old and I met the man who could talk to animals, and how I learned to talk to animals, because Dr. Dolittle is not, in fact, super unique, because it's made clear that learning to talk to animals is just a thing. You can learn how to talk to animals like you can learn how to talk French. At least according to some people, maybe not according to French people, who can be extremely exacting about accents, or so I have heard. Anyway, so I recommend this as long as you're braced for the N-word early on in the book, because it comes up once and then never again. It's fun. It's silly. Don't read this edition, because look at that cover. That's all I have to say, and I will see you all next week.